services were using it, and now there's much broader use across the country. I mean, all I can do is repeat what the police say, and they say that their assessment is these proposed legislations will jeopardize public safety. They say it will seriously compromise a system that is working to the betterment of personal, community, and police officer safety, and I think that's really important. I know in Alberta that one of the issues around rifles and shotguns has been their repeated use in cases of domestic violence, which is why groups like the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters have been very strong on this. But one of the reasons why the police organizations are also very supportive is not just because of the use of these guns in crime, but more police officers in this country have been killed with long guns than with handguns, and they recognize that.
And since the registry, since the registry was brought in.
Why do you keep interrupting me? Sorry.
I haven't interrupted you. Beyond that. Okay, I mean, I'm not just handing this show over to you, Wendy. This is a conversation. So I'm going to interject. I'm going to ask questions. That's okay, isn't it?
Sure.
Okay, and you said, well, okay.
Interrupt me all you like.
Well, all right. Well, you've done the same here too. I'd remind you that those incidents of officers being shot with long guns occurred since we've had the long gun registry. So you point to those as why we need one, and yet it didn't prevent those.
No, but overall, firearm death and injury has declined dramatically. The reason why the police point to its continued need is because some politicians say rifles and shotguns are not a problem, and they simply point out that, in fact, in some circumstances they are, even though murders with rifles and shotguns have fallen by over 60% since the registry was put in place.
But yeah, homicides are up since the registry.
Well, they're not actually. Gun homicides are flat, and overall homicides are down. What you see is that murders with handguns have the rate per 100,000 has stayed about the same, but murders with rifles and shotguns have come down quite dramatically, and that's in part because of the stronger controls. It's part of the reason why some people, of course, want stronger controls now on handguns, because it's recognized that the controls introduced over long guns have been very effective, but we continue to have problems with handguns.
Wendy, hang on a second here. Wendy Cukier, President of the Coalition for Gun Control. It's The World Tonight. We're back after this.
You're listening to The World Tonight with Rob Breckenridge, where you find out how the day's stories around the world will affect Calgarians. The World Tonight on AM770 CHQR.
Our guest, Wendy Cukier, President of the Coalition for Gun Control, talking about what the future holds for the firearms registry, the long gun registry. In any event, let's go to the phones here as well. This is Karen. Hi, Karen. Welcome to the program.
Hi. I think, Wendy, you keep referring to the Police Association's report and their preference. And I think if the police were asked a more reasonable question, which is, would you rather have the finances spent on the gun registry or on more police officers on the street, I think you'd get a very different answer. The fact of the matter is it's too cost inefficient it's not achieving what it set out to do. And I think we'd be better off, and so I think the police would as well, putting the money toward more police officers.
Well, that's an interesting point, because the fact is most of the money has been spent, and what the RCMP reported before estimates last year is eliminating the registration of rifles and shotguns in Canada will save a total of $3 million a year. Something like the Mayerthorpe homicide investigation probably cost $2 million. You just have to save 2 homicide investigations, and you've basically paid for the registry. I mean, they consider it to be a pretty affordable tool at $3 million a year, given the number of times police officers use. So the whole notion that somehow eliminating the registration of rifles and shotguns is going to recover the money that was spent is really misleading.
Well,
and
it's not going to recover. It's not going to recover.
Clearly, they support it.
Well, they got their estimate. Other estimates put that as high as $50 million a year.
that includes licensing. You see, that's part of the confusion. People talk about, quote, the registry and getting rid of the registry, but there are two components. One is the licensing of gun owners, and the other is the registration of firearms. The entire cost of registering all guns, handguns, assault weapons, all guns, is under $10 million, and as I said, the registration portion associated with rifles and shotguns is only a marginal cost of $3 million a year, because they're not proposing to get rid of the registration of handguns or assault weapons. They're not proposing to eliminate the licensing provisions, which are the most expensive provisions. As you can imagine, people have to be screened and the licenses have to be reissued. But registration is one time only. 7 million guns have been registered, and so the only costs associated with registering rifles and shotguns is when new guns are bought or when guns trade hands.
All right, Karen, appreciate the phone call. Wendy, how many guns are out there that are not registered?
It's hard to say. The Firearms Centre estimates that approximately 90% of Canadians have complied with the legislation.
You don't think that's high?
I don't really have any way of judging. I know that in some communities compliance is lower, but it's consistent with the estimates that were done by reliable sources in terms of the numbers of guns in Canada. It's consistent with our rates of homicide and suicide, which suggests that we have about 17 to 20% of homes with guns in this country, so I think the estimates are reasonable.
All right, back to the phones. This is Al. Al, go ahead.
Do you know if institutions like the École Polytechnique have security guards and metal detectors at their door, at the entrances?
I don't think so.
Why not? We know where the potential victims are, but we do not know where the potential shooters are. So it's a lot.
Well, I don't know. Well, Al, where does that all end? I mean, we'll have metal detectors at malls, movie theaters?
Which would you prefer? 18 innocent people killed, or however, 14 or whatever it was, or to pay a little bit of money to have security guards and metal? I'd rather have security guards and metal detectors than have a whole bunch of corpses laying around.
Well, everywhere?
Well, every large institution, schools and big buildings that house a lot of people. It's a lot cheaper than burying people.
Well, I don't know. I think that would add up, Al. I don't know that that's...
And also, guns don't kill. Ammunition kills. Why don't we focus on putting controls on the manufacture of bullets and shotgun shells? Well, why don't we focus on controlling the manufacture of ammunition and leave the gun owners alone?
Well, they would have to buy it too, right?
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, if you can't buy ammunition unless you have a license, right? So where are these criminals getting the ammunition?
Well, I don't know. Where are they, Wendy?
I think there are a variety of sources. You know, the people who smuggle in guns smuggle ammunition with it.
Yeah, but the gun has
well, hang on, Al. Hang on.
The other issue with ammunition is lots of people make it themselves. And I'm sure there are unscrupulous dealers who sell ammunition illegally the same way they sell guns illegally. There have been discussions, especially with, high tech. I think in Switzerland, where they manufacture high-end guns, they've been experimenting with tagans that they can actually put into the ammunition to allow it to be traced. But I think the starting point is really making sure that you can track the guns as well.
Okay.
Hello? Can I ask one more question?
Well, quickly, come on.
You mentioned domestic violence. Do you honestly believe that if a husband is so drunk or on drugs or has an anger management control problem, a husband is a real jerk, do you honestly think that he gets mad enough at his wife and he doesn't have a gun that he's just going to sit there and say, oh, well, I don't have a gun, so I'm not going to beat the crap out of her. I'm not going to hit her with a baseball bat or a butcher knife or whatever. Do you honestly think that banning guns is going to stop domestic violence?
No, but there's a difference between violence and homicide, and guns are particularly efficient, and there's very good evidence.
So is a baseball bat. So is a baseball bat.
Or knife. Yeah, you're right. I think you're right.
Very good evidence. There have been studies done that show that when guns are present, women are much more likely to be killed, children are more likely to be killed, and there's a 50% chance that the killer will commit suicide. When there are other means, beatings, and so on used, people are more likely to survive.
On that point, what about those who have been banned from owning guns or those who have restraining orders? And one of the arguments is that the registry is not at all effective in tracking those individuals.
I think those are good points. I think that there are lots of people who would argue that the legislation is very good, but more resources need to be put in place for its enforcement. And certainly, any women's organization will tell you that the enforcement of restraining orders is a problem. At the same time, groups like the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters are very, very clear that they support the existing firearms legislation because they see it as an important tool in preventing domestic homicide.
All right, we'll leave it there, Wendy, and I guess we'll see what happens in Ottawa. Appreciate your time here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, Wendy Cukier. She got a little sensitive at one point there. Anyway, so there's some thoughts from her. Nothing surprising, and I think, as I said earlier, these lines have been drawn in the sand a long time ago. Do we need the firearms registry? Has it made a difference? We're going to keep going with your calls here, 974-8255. We're back after this.
The stories behind the world headlines. What do they mean?